Well, welcome everyone to the workshop on shaping the way we teach English. We're very happy that you're here to join us today. Shaping the way we teach English was a project from 2004 to 2006 with the State Department, the Office of English Language Programs. We were contracted to produce an introductory set of video-based teacher training materials. The purpose of today's workshop is for me. My name is Leslie Opp-Beckman. I'm saying this for the purpose of the video. And my co-leader, Kay Westerfield, to roughly replicate for you a tiny piece of a training session that we conducted last fall in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia with groups of women EFL educators and inspectors. And the reason we find ourselves doing that today is that Peggy Dame has some teachers coming this summer who are working at the primary grade level, and they're working in an EFL setting, and we have teachers in our group here today who are looking for some new materials and resources with which to work with them. So I want you to bear in mind that the materials that you're looking at today are going to be very familiar to you in content. We don't expect any huge revelation in teaching methodology for 90% of you here in the room. If you pick up a tip or a strategy or a fresh idea or a reminder, then that's kind of a bonus. What we're really about here today is to immerse ourselves in a training experience as though we were the teachers being trained. And then to also take periodic steps back from it as we're going through things today to talk about why the training was structured in the way it is, and to discuss adaptations you might want to make or ideas or suggestions for your own future training events. As I mentioned at the beginning, these were produced by the Department of State. They fall under a kind of quirky copyright convention, something called the Smith-Mundt Act, which states that these materials can be freely used outside the United States in EFL training situations. They cannot be used inside the United States, except at the University of Oregon. So we had some special clauses built in when we signed the original documentation. So we can freely use them in our LT program and in our AEI training programs. Those of you who are going on to teach in countries outside of the United States, you're also welcome to use these. They reside in the public domain. That means that you can photocopy them. You can make copies of the DVDs. You can copy anything off the supporting website. You can use it to your heart's content. If you find yourself with such a degraded and worn out copy in the future that you need a new one, you can order one through your local embassy, public affairs, for $6.94. So the government has made it very, very affordable. The idea is very wide dissemination. The materials themselves were designed to degrade. So although the original copy is in color, Kay has one of the nice color copies, it also prints well in grayscale. And when you print it and reprint it and reprint it and reprint it, it holds up pretty well for about the first 10 to 15 times. So it's truly designed to be an EFL resource out in countries where they don't necessarily have a lot of resources, where you have rural teachers, where you have schools that may be using very non-native speakers or people with kind of minimal training. So they're designed for that kind of audience as well. All right, well, you'll notice from the introductory screen that the video is divided up into 14 modules. What you're seeing are the first 5 with the introduction here. Before you leave today, please make sure if you'd like a copy of complimentary DVDs that you pick up a set. They're on the table out there. At your table here this afternoon, I'm going to pick on you all day. We printed out a copy of the manual for you. There's also an electronic copy on the DVDs. There's a second resource that looks a lot like this, and what it is it's a supplementary set of readings. So for each of the modules, we worked very closely with U of O's Copyright Office, and we obtained permission to freely copy and distribute 200 articles that match the module. So you have a little mini library that goes with it. This particular set of DVDs is the original master designed by Media Services here at University of Oregon. Some additional small tweaking has gone on over at the Washington, D.C. offices, not to the content itself, but more to the size of the eagle on the front opening screen. And so your eagle is a little smaller than the official copy that's out there, but it is official, nonetheless. Okay. we'd like at this point to let the video kind of speak for itself. It is designed to do that. And so Kay and I are going to take you through the introduction. The introduction is very short, it's about 5 minutes. The other modules are from 8 to 12 minutes in length. We had a very small time constraint for each one of them. They're very dense. So we'll be looking at modules 8 and 12 a little bit later today, but let's go ahead and start with the introduction. Okay. What we're going to do now is do a slight adaptation to one of the supplementary materials that's available through the website. This is called a See, Don't See activity. It's a real brief getting the main ideas of what you've just seen from a video scene. It's a video observation technique. So let's pass these out, and in your group, if you want to take a couple minutes and see what kind of answers you come up with for these, that would be wonderful. Yeah.
Did we see and many kind of educators? No, many kind of seniors. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Many ages of learners?
And then we saw people wandering around. But then there's also interaction with students asking teachers questions too. So that was really nice to see on film, because usually you just films often focus on the teacher, and so you don't see how the students are.
Yeah, I was just fascinated. I kind of like the mystery of it all, like, you know, what was going on. So, yeah.
Okay, what about number 1? Classes from around the world. See or don't see?
Oh, yeah.
See.
Yeah, I think that's one of the real strengths of the program. You see such a variety of teaching contexts and cultures that are all wrapped up together there. It's wonderful.
Oh, how about many kinds of educators, number 2?
Well, yes. I mean, if there had only been one, that would have been just one. But
Yeah. That is like stating the obvious, huh? This is not a trivial thing. I mean, part of our approach or our framework to this was to try to capture as many educational styles and different examples of teaching. And it's really interesting because when we were field testing this in different parts of the world, and even with different audiences here, people will say they respond very viscerally or emotionally. It's your first sort of reaction to watching another teach is often a very emotional one. You have to sort of train yourself to step back from that. And people will say, "Oh, I didn't like that teacher," you know, and it'll be the same teacher that somebody else said, "Oh, she was my favorite, you know, that was the best. I just loved what she did with those students." And so, tremendous variation.
I was watching what they were wearing, and how that would play in different locations.
Oh, exactly. Sleeveless tops, or
You know, we filmed them some very hot tropical places where people have much more relaxed kind of clothing standards. It's interesting. With the right kind of sort of prefacing of this and a careful orientation to it, we've actually had really good response to that. We were really excited because the head of the Ministry of Education in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which if you don't mind me saying, is probably one of the most conservative in this kind of regard,
right.
With
Terms of
appearance, is
dress.
very, very sensitive to appearance. Wholeheartedly endorse this as a training tool for their public school
very
teachers.
exciting.
We trained 300 teachers last fall. They wanted us to come back this summer and this fall again. We can only come once, but we're going to do another 300 this fall as well. So I think as we get more into sort of like what is the framework here, who does the decision-making lie with these materials? And I hope one of the messages you got is that it's very much in the hands of the person who's doing the viewing and the teacher in the classroom. We tried to avoid a talking head, single teacher kind of format. We tried very hard to capture EFL best practices for other EFL teachers. The whole thing is designed, Sarah and I very carefully designed it so that you have a critical framework to observe and analyze these materials, but ultimately the decision 100% lies in the hands of the teacher who's in the classroom about what they choose to adopt or adapt or not. So when we're training, we really emphasize that up front. And again, I think I can say we had excellent evaluations. We had good results with that. In Yemen, in Saudi Arabia, pretty much, well, everywhere
Egypt,
we've worked.
yeah.
Egypt. So it's a good point. It's one I think you have to proactively address carefully when you're training with it.
So what about number 3, many ages of learners? And and I think, Leslie, would you were
Yeah, I think
have
it's
talked
both a
before
limitation
about,
and a strength of the product. And so when the State Department asked us to design this, they said, we want 14 modules. You must have 14 topics. It can only be 3 hours long. Well, when you do the math on that, you wind up with 12, maybe 15 minutes max per module. And they said, and it must be applicable to learners of all ages. So Sarah and I really gnashed our teeth on this one. And what we wound up doing again is putting in, and Lynette and Ward worked with us as well, so we actually did diagnostics. So 25% pictures young learners, 25% other ages, and then 25% different parts of the world, boys versus girls, men versus women. So what you get is little smatterings of lots of different things, but the point to make when you're training with these materials is that the techniques and the methods are applicable regardless of the age. You can scale them. So you can change the task, you can change the pacing, you can change the combination. It's not that when you see something being done with 10-year-olds that you can only do it with 10-year-olds. So you'll notice in the introduction it emphasizes think outside the box, think creatively, look at these with a critical and analytical, innovative kind of eye. And again, it seems that when we really stress that up front, that we have good results with the training groups as we go through them. Bruno.
We thought that we didn't see adult learners. So many.
Young adults.
Young adults are
So
later.
the difference between young adults and teens is pretty blurry, especially when you get outside the United States. Sometimes the only thing that you can tell the difference is maybe one's wearing a uniform and one's not.
You're going to
and
see
even
some
that's not a
examples, I think, in the later one on some job preparation.
So if
So
you did
young adults, you mean
Young adults.
post-high school?
post-secondary, so
Post-secondary.
academic English kinds of settings. We have a little bit of a kind of a refugee kind of class in one or two of the videos, but these are primarily for academic kinds of EFL teaching settings, not so much immigrant or refugee. Not to say that you couldn't apply them, but that wasn't one of our focus taping areas. Okay. Students always sitting in rows?
No.
No, lots of different. You do see students sitting in rows. In our EFL settings, one of their biggest challenges is overcrowded classrooms. They'll have a classroom this size with 60 people crammed into it. You can talk, sit on the floor, in wide open circles all you want, but if the chairs don't fit that way, it ain't gonna happen. So again, there's this balance of what's an ideal or a recommended best practice, what would we love to have happen, what are the real conditions with which I must work? And depending on the teacher training groups that you're working with, that's going to vary. But we did try to show variation.
And along the same lines, and the next one, the same size of classes.
See or don't see?
No, very different.
It was
different
hard to
size.
tell sometimes because we only saw
Pieces.
few students at a time.
Okay, so that's something you might want to be watching for in the other modules if you see other examples of that. A variety of resources and aids. Yes. Yeah, definitely. A lot of times when Kay and I are working in developing countries or low resource kinds of areas, people will say, I need teaching aids, I must have teaching aids. And what they equate that with is a lot of money to buy stuff. And what we really try to focus on is a range. So you do see resources that cost money and they're sort of high-end stuff. But we also try to do a lot of examples of the kinds of things we're going to create later here today, which are student-generated materials, using resources from your local environment, repurposing or recycling things. So we also try to show low resource and student-generated kinds of examples as well. How many modules?
10?
14. Ooh, very good, very good. I bet you're one of the people that put your clothespin on the right way too.
First I didn't, but I changed it.
Ah, she learns by doing. That's good, that's good. How about topics of interest to you? Did you see any topics that you might be able to use in your own training? Anybody? Yeah? For instance?
Learning strategies, and authentic materials, that's something that a lot of the students that we teach or train are very, very interested in. And it's one of the hardest sorts of things actually to sort of tell them about or teach them about. It's a hard concept for people to get their heads around.
It is. Actually, that was our hardest module to put together. It's a very difficult thing to show, too.
Because a lot of times it's inside your head.
Inside the head. And what we wound up doing for that particular module is a teacher who was doing a lot of talking out loud about how she diagnosed that in the classroom and then set it up and addressed it as part of her teaching plan and her learning. Yeah.
And also I really like the class management for bigger size classes, because in Tunisia, like, it's 35 to 40 students go. So that would be really interesting to look at.
Okay. Have you experienced any self-management strategies in today's workshop yet? Char?
The sign-in.
Sign in. You signed yourselves in. Did the teacher waste 5 minutes or 10 minutes taking roll for 40 noisy children? Did we do that? No. Sign in occurred as you came in the door. So one of the key points of the self-managing module 6 is that you take the load off the teacher. What can you take off the teacher and empower the student and put the responsibility back on the student to do? So when you came in today, we weren't standing there handing out papers, saying the same instructions over and over again. You had instructions on what to do. You had a little list of things to keep yourself on task and busy when you came in within your group. Those of you who sort of understood what was going on with the clothespins found your name, and you signed yourself in on the sign-in sheet up here. What do you think would happen at the end of the day? Yeah, you're going to move it over to the other side and sign yourself out. So this is a really quick way for the teacher to have attendance. It's also a strategy for managing groups later in the day. You can move those clothespins around and cluster them and tell people to get into the groups according to the clothespins you've put together. A hint, for those of you who have your names upside down, your name is on both sides of the clothespin. So if you like being upside down, that works. That's totally, that's a statement all by itself there. If you want to flip your clothespin over, we invite you to do that as well. But, it's up to the individual. Okay.
So that was a trick.
That was a trick. That was a test. Yes. Yes. So self-management is a topic we get really frequently asked for. We'll be working in groups today. It's an integral part of that. I just want to emphasize the modules are standalone. You do not have to go through them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What Kay and I often do is we'll get asked for a sort of a menu approach, and we'll wind up combining them. So we might combine classroom management with group work. Or today we're combining authentic materials with younger learners. So you can kind of mix and match them too. Okay.
Are we ready? Should we move into Unit 8, Module 8, Authentic Materials. So getting you to think about what types of authentic materials have you been using in your classrooms, teaching situations? Yeah.
I try to use a lot of authentic materials from TV.
From TV?
TV, movies, dramas, right? So
Great.
movie script.
Okay,
Or
so
news.
bringing in the electronic media. Anybody else? Yeah.
Oh, no, I didn't have a question.
Oh, you just needed a paper. Bruno, tell us, what type of authentic materials have you used with your construction workers here in UG?
Yes, that's right. I got $140 worth of hard hats and reflecting jackets and work gloves and all the different safety equipment that they need to work more safely.
The safety language was one of your course objectives.
Yes, that's right, safety language. And then I made little cards with a picture of all the safety language, and we played memory game to try to match the pairs of different materials that they use.
And the good thing was then you could then return those items to Home
Yes,
Depot,
that's right.
right?
You got
So
it.
you didn't have to end up spending
Got a full
$140 on construction safety equipment.
That's right.
Well, we're going to dive into Module 8, which is authentic materials.
But before we do, we're going to use the see, don't see observation task again. This time, instead of using it after viewing as a discussion tool, we're going to give it to you ahead of time. As you're watching, please look for answers to these 8 questions or these 8 items. I'm not going to read them out loud. If you can just silently read them to yourself as we're queuing up the video, you'll be prepared to see whether you see or don't see them as we go through. These are longer. This one's about 10 minutes long. It's divided into sections. I think we'll look at it all the way through,
Right.
and then we'll match it to the manual, sort of do an abbreviated use of the materials.
Right.
'cause we're
The
gonna be close on
manual, the
time.
manual is rich with all different types of discussion questions, reflection questions, observation charts that the viewers can be filling in while they're watching the video. But given our time constraints today, we aren't going to be focusing on those. So we'll use our during viewing activity.
The scene that you just saw was relatively short. It was less than 2 minutes long. The way that Lynette and Ward have edited them down, they're very, very dense, and they're designed to be repurposed for more than one viewing. So what are some ways you could imagine viewing a kindergarten scene like that? Let's say you're working this summer with the Korean teachers who are working at the primary grade level. You might watch it the first time through. One of your focus areas might be what?
Use of target language.
Use of target language, right. Very, very, what did you notice about the use of target language?
It was all in English.
It was all in English. She used 100% English. This is the first day of school in Costa Rica public kindergarten, and this is explained in your book. They briefly mentioned in the narration too. All English, so all English. What else did you notice?
Very repetitive.
Very, very repetitive, okay?
Was it boring?
No.
No. Were the kids falling asleep? Were they wiggly? Were they? No, so it was, although it was repetitive, the pacing, her pacing was good. You could look at pacing. What did you notice about the physical layout of the room? Where were the kids? They're on the floor. Where was the teacher? On the floor. Yeah, so she's right down there working with them. What was the size of the materials she was working with? What was their scale? On the floor, kindergarten size. So you could also draw attention to the physical layout of the room. There's a lot of assumptions that went into that, a lot of thought that went into how the room was physically laid out and how she conducted that, just that one little tiny part of the lesson. Anything else you noticed about it?
I wonder if the kids weren't intimidated by the size of the doll.
Think so?
Because, kids might be used to theater and small puppets and things, and then you see these big, huge dolls sitting in front of you, like, oh.
It was a surprise.
It was
A surprise.
Actually,
for
that wasn't
them.
my sense, but it's interesting that you raised the issue of puppets because we do have her full-length class, and it's one of the classes we'll be working up as part of an observation library that we're putting together, and she did use little tiny popsicle stick puppets and another circle kind of game activity that went with it. Yes?
Shaking hands when she kind of rewards when
Oh,
he
no,
answers.
this is really interesting. This is something you could look at across all of the videos, the different teachers and the way they reinforce students. One of the things every teacher asked us, they said, if I do something wrong or bad, are you going to point that out on the video? Say, oh, no, we're only looking at best practices. But the way that teachers choose to give praise or give reinforcement or congratulate or connect with students is very different. So as you notice, she shook hands. In our classes in Egypt, they say clap. They'll say clap for K, and then the class will, clap for K. Around the world, it's really interesting. There was some consistency, but there were also some large differences too. So you could focus on reinforcement that the teacher was giving and how that was happening.
And I think just awareness of your own culture. These are not native speakers, but being aware of their own culture and what is appropriate behavior. I noticed that the teacher would touch the child's head. Well, in some cultures, you don't.
That's the one place you would touch, or you wouldn't touch at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. So, what are the teacher behaviors? Teacher talk. You mentioned sort of the language level. Nobody mentioned yet. She was using extremely controlled vocabulary. Very, very slow pacing, very careful enunciation as part of that model.
Speaking in chunks, she wasn't isolating the language all the time. She was sometimes, but not all the time.
Yeah, you had this sort of natural rhythm to it too.
The thing I think that would impress most of the students, I think, that I've taught would be the scale of what she was trying to achieve. Yeah, boy and girl.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's a hard thing for a lot of teachers, especially beginning teachers to grasp is, that's a lesson. 2 vocabulary words can be a lesson and it's valid, and the amount of time you spend on that is something, yeah.
That's a really good point.
And looking at her language learning objectives, and why do you also suppose she had them sitting on the floor? And why did she bring in the dolls? What were her other types of objectives for that first class and the first day of kindergarten?
So they had a good time. So
Had
they had
fun.
a positive connection with the language. That's just as valid a goal.
She's making it's a group. They're a
So
group
the-
immediately on the floor. They're learning each other's names as they're going through this activity of learning English also.
So the affective objectives that she set for that first day in
And
kindergarten.
the bonding, the warming up, the getting to know each other as well.
And maybe the big size of the puppets is meant to have them focused and pay attention to the puppets, because if it's a really small puppet, they would be maybe interacting with each other and playing or something. It's not really, big enough for them to cap their attention. Maybe it's meant to do that.
I think that's a good point, Darcy. Yeah.
I think the colors of the puppets were very attractive. Also the clothes. I think especially colors, are very important to children.
And were they expensive? Realia? No.
No, she made the cardboard cutouts, and the T-shirts were the same kind of T-shirts, very similar to what the students were wearing, just everyday local work shirts. Yes.
What was interesting also, giving the dolls names, actually, they weren't like foreign names, and they were the same as the target one, so this was interesting.
Good observation. So she wasn't saying John and Lucy, and she went ahead and used local names, and then it sort of made the dolls more real or more personal to the students as well. Yeah. Good. Right. Oh, you guys saw a lot. Yes.
Her original idea wasn't to shake hands, I think, with the child. She said, "Give me 5," right? And the child didn't know to give her 5, so she just shook her hand.
They did a negotiated there. Yeah, so cultural negotiation moments. Yeah.
I might have just said, "Give me 5," and mimic the gesture or something.
Oh, maybe.
Because kids love that. They love to slap hands once they get it.
So we should, one of the things that we've talked, Sarah and I have talked about, and Tom mentioned recently this week, it'd be really fun. I wish we had the budget to go back to these classrooms. It'd be fun to go back, once a month. So you could look and see if they were giving them 5, 1 month later, if their English skills had progressed, to that point where they.
And I also like the idea of prompting the answer. Like, even though the kids didn't know the answer, there is no space, there is no volume. She gives the answer. She said, "What is this?" They don't know. Oh, that's a boy. That's a girl. So she's there for them. She's kind of coaching them all the time.
And was it okay that they didn't know the answer? Was it a testing kind of condition?
I don't think that was bad. It was really good, because if you make them feel that they're tested, that might block them from talking.
Exactly. It was very open. It was very fun. The one little boy, I noticed you all laughing.
Oh, the face!
I had no idea. And as you say, she just kind of kept going, and then and then he eventually got it too. So yeah.
And then once they had a little better idea what was going on, when she elicited an answer, she waited a little bit before giving it. He's a, and they said boy, and she's a good, and then she helped with girl.
Mm-hmm. And that's a tough thing if you're training new teachers. The tendency is to really want to jump in there and give those answers really fast, and that's something an experienced teacher learns to train themselves to do. Is it's really hard to wait for those answers to come out, but that she was doing significant pausing to give them a chance to process it and try to get it out. Since we're paused, and Kay and I want to try to break around too, I just want to draw your attention back to the manual before we finish the rest of this one, and point out to you, if you look at Module 8, which starts on page 83, I'm going to make sure we're using the same versions. What you'll notice is that each module has the exact same parts to it. So there's a suggested there's an overview and a suggested warm-up activity. We haven't been doing the warm-up activities, but in a more in-depth training situation, we would do that. On the next page, you'll see there's a very, very brief glossary section. These are terms that the trainees will hear as part of the video narration, and they may also see in the supplementary readings that go with it. And then for each part of the video, you'll notice we just came to the end of the kindergarten class. That was video segment 1 for Module 8. And we're just headed into video segment 2. So they're divided up. This is a new class, and you can have previewing questions to think about ahead of time. There are discussion questions for afterwards. We've been doing it kind of on the fly here today in the interest of saving time, and also because this is familiar content to all of you. But these supports are here. Obviously, you can use or not use them, according to what you'd like to do. Mm-hmm. And there are different observation guides and strategies as well.
As Leslie pointed out, the narration in the film is basically reproduced in the manual, so that's really useful in EFL situations for teachers for whom English is a foreign language.
Actually, there's a verbatim script now for each one of the modules too. Those
Oh,
are all up
fantastic.
now. So when you pick up your set of DVDs, you'll get a handout that goes with it. And all this week, every time I sent the URL out on AEI News, it's like something happened to it. People kept
One of
writing to me,
those
it's not
weeks.
working, it's not working. It is working, but just not in my email messages. But if you go to the email site here, all of the exact transcripts for all 14 modules are now posted on the website. These were done afterwards. They were not part of the original contract. I just did them because they needed to be done. So those are there too, if you need them for training support.
So what did you see or what didn't you see? What about the first one? Vocabulary list to memorize? No. Dolls used to learn in context? Yeah, definitely. Learners bringing realia to school? Yes. Mm-hmm. Student projects housed in the school library on the Sinai. Wasn't that a great, great project? How proud. You could just see how proud those young men were. It was fabulous. Project-based learning?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Expensive items for bookmaking. Where were they getting the items for their books?
Magazines,
Yeah.
newspapers.
Online. Mm-hmm. Student work displayed on walls. You know, when you have a classroom that's dedicated to your class, you can do so much with that, can't you? And it turns it into such a rich learning environment. And finally, classroom connections to students' experiences. Yeah, definitely. So Leslie and I have also put together a series of checklists.
When we did the field testing for these materials, and we were working with approval from various ministries of education, one of their questions was how will we have evidence, or how will our teachers know whether they're seeing these things in their classrooms or not? And so this is a fairly simple observation checklist. If you do the training with your teachers, and then later you or someone else or they are observing each other, how will they know if they've implemented any of these things or not? And this is a suggested observation checklist that matches directly with the video and the reading materials that go with it. These are not in the manual. They are something that was developed later as well. They are freely available on the supporting website along with the transcripts. The other question that we often get asked is, it takes a lot of time to go through and sort of like think of all the answers to the questions for each one of these video observations, and the manual does have a suggested key in it. Again, many of the things that you're observing are open-ended. You're already seeing things that we didn't see, or you're seeing them differently. And so although there are some sort of right versus wrong things, a lot of this is very open-ended, and there is an open-ended key with some suggestions for what you might be seeing in the video as well. So each module has a key at the end of it, an answer key. Are you ready for a break?
Yeah.
Yeah, this first part, we sort of did our sitting down part. For the next part, when you come back, we'll have the classroom reconfigured. We'll focus on younger learners, and we'll be doing some hands-on kinds of fun things with those. During the break, we are going to ask, if you don't mind, if you could pick up, I'm sorry, it's a bit of a hassle, but pick up all your stuff, and everybody could leave the room because we need to completely reconfigure it. As your reward, there are 2 tables of free items out there. There's 1 copy for each person. Please feel free to look through and take absolutely anything that interests you out there. So, in the first half of the workshop, we did a little bit of looking already at younger learners, and a reminder that today's focus is on younger learners because that's one of our teacher training programs that we have coming up. The notion of stations, which we're going to be working with in the second part of the workshop today, is not relevant only to younger learners, though. This is a concept that many of you already use in your classes at the university level and at other levels as well. It's simply the idea that you have more than one activity going on at the same time in the classroom. They may be thematically or content linked. You may have them distributed according to specific skill areas. They may be structured according to level, so the lower level versus the higher level students are doing things. There are lots of ways that you can organize these. These are things this kind of instructional strategy is not something that you typically see in an EFL setting, and it is something that's a lot of interest to teachers. What we found is that you can pretty much talk about it till you're blue in the face. And it sounds really good, but the best way to get people comfortable with it and able to do it in their classrooms is actually to do what we're going to do this afternoon, which is set up centers, have them rotate through, and debrief it, and it's like a big light bulb goes off. They get it. And that's the best strategy that we found so far for doing that. There is some organization, obviously, that goes into it. When you look around the room, we have 5 centers. How can you tell where the centers are? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, how did you identify them? How did you know they were centers? How did you know they were separate? The yarn. So they have different colors. So this one is, everything here is purple. Everything here is green. That's the blue corner. This is black. It's very dark. This is the red corner. The colors have no particular significance. It's like what I could find at the bookstore.
Found
colors
the bananas at the bookstore?
Yeah. In fact, colors do have significance in some cultures, and so there may be colors that you would or would not stay away from, depending. I think it's also important to recognize that worldwide, 20% of the male population has some kind of degree of, I hesitate to use the word color blindness, but color difference, where they may not be able to distinguish between just colors. So our organizational schema today is very, very simple. Ideally, you would also build in some kind of iconicity. So this might not only have a black color, it might have an icon of some kind, and that same icon would be reflected as well. What you also will observe in the video is that teachers who do this on a daily basis or a routine basis may have floor markers. You'll notice the positioning of the chairs, the furniture, or the chairs may sort of help spatially set off the classroom. What do you notice about the chairs and how they're organized? They're close together. They're close together. There's space for people to move around in between. In some cases, you may not have chairs at all. Every time we do this activity, everybody immediately gets rid of the chairs, and they're all on the floor anyway. So I'm not even sure why we put chairs there, except we thought some of you might prefer chairs, so we did. This one has no chairs. This is a standing up activity. What do you think is the purpose of the yarns? Why are the yarns there, aside from just, stunningly beautiful decoration? Why else might the yarns be there? Might be part of an activity. That's a good guess.
6 members in our group, 6 seatings.
You're 6 chairs, 6 yarns. So remember at the beginning we talked about self-management strategies. So this is something you would train your students on. Your teachers that you're training would train the students on at the beginning of the year. It's center time. You can make the most of your time if you're a good self-manager. You have 20 minutes. You can go to as many centers as you like. You will know if a spot is available at a center by looking up at the number of available yarns. So right now, all 6 of you are sitting here, and when we're doing center time, in order to have your space and hold your space at this center, you need to be wearing one of the yarns. I finished here. I'm wandering around. I want something to do. I look over here. There's no green yarns. Can I sit here? No. No. Do I stop and talk and bug them and try to take one of their yarns off? And no. No, that's not being a good self-manager. I need to go and find a group where there's an available yarn and put it on, and I read the instructions and I begin the activity. Okay? So it's another management device, a self-management device. Okay, so we're going to be doing that today too. Okay.